welcome back to the channel. Today, a book haul. This is part of my autumn book haul, but this is just the paperbacks this time. I had to split them up because I bought quite a few books. Let me just pull these further forward. I would have been reaching out of shot for those then. I started with some nostalgia. So in the late 80s, I was, as most young boys are, I was really into dinosaurs, I was really into sharks, I was really into, like playing soldier and stuff like that. So sharks was something I was really into. I used to have lots of, like National Geographic style books on sharks that I used to read before bed and what have you. And I bought this book in a secondhand bookstore in the late 80s. It's called Shark. It's by Robin Brown, and I wanted to reread it. I don't know why. I remember this being absolutely ridiculous, about a shark attacking a nuclear submarine. It gets in a fight, I think, with a killer whale. First of all, it's meant to be a megalodon. It's clearly not a picture of a megalodon, but it is meant to be a 100-foot long, 200-ton megalodon. It's just fun. It wasn't a high quality book, but it's one that I was interested in rereading, maybe for Garb August in a future year. And the book I bought at a similar time was Jaws 2. Now, this book came out the year I was born, actually, probably why it was doing the rounds in the used bookstores in the late 80s. This one actually came out just at the end of the 70s, Jaws 2. Now, this is not kind of related to the original Jaws novel. It is actually just an adaptation of the Jaws 2 screenplay, but I've heard they've changed a few bits. I remember a lot of the plot points of this one. I don't remember so much the plot points of this one. I'll probably get them confused with the movie. So I will probably like to reread these at some point. I paid £3 for these, about $4. They weren't particularly expensive, but I'm happy to have them for the nostalgia of it. Another book I paid £3 for was Sword of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs. This nice little vintage paperback. I've wanted to read some Edgar Rice Burroughs for a while. I didn't know if I wanted to read this series or Tarzan. It's not going to be this year, I know. I've got way too much on my TBR, but when I saw this for £3, I thought it's in pretty good condition considering its age. This is 50-year-old paperback. But yeah, for £3, some Edgar Rice Burroughs and some Fritz Leiber, I can never remember how to pronounce his name. It's Swords and Deviltry. I think this is it's got a little blurb here by Michael Moorcock, so this is probably a very good book. It is a Farad and the Grey Mouser book, which I've been interested in reading. I know Gareth over at Books and Other Magic is often talking about those. So when I saw this for cheap, I thought I'd pick that up. And I've also heard a lot about Gene Wolfe, especially on Duncan's channel, Back Away from the Donkey. If you want to hear some Gene Wolfe, he loves Gene Wolfe over there. And I've got this, The Claw and the Conciliator. This is the sequel to Shadow the Torturer, basically, a Book of the New Sun sequel. I couldn't find Book of the New Sun in the bookstore, but I picked this up because it was very cheap, only about $4. Now, a little bit more expensive at $4.50 was a book on my bucket list. This is The Metamorphosis by Ovid. I have been struggling to find a copy of this. I wanted like a Penguin Classics version, but they seem to go for quite a bit. I didn't want to pay more than £3 or £4 for one, which I know is extremely tight of me because it is such a well considered piece of literature. But what can I say? I'm buying a lot of books, so I've got to keep the costs down. So I managed to find a reasonable conditioned Penguin Classics version of this in the end. Now back down to the £3 or $4 mark. I picked up a few different books here. Some sci-fi. John Windam, The Midwich Cuckoos. This nice little penguin paperback. It has some wrinkling on the spine, but other than that, it's in really good condition. Again, it's over 50 years old now. I think this copy, it might have been right on the early 70s actually. And let's have a little look, shall we? Well, actually, yeah, it looks like it was a 71 printing, so yeah, over 50 years, in pretty good nick. I love the cover, and it is a book that is maybe not in my kind of top 100 on my TBR, but it's certainly in that second 100, so one I would definitely like to get to in a few years' time. I was looking for Death World by Harry Harrison. and I managed to find Death World 2 and 3, but not Death World. So I picked them up anyway. They were in pretty good condition, as you can tell. The spines are in good condition. They're not too... This one's a little scuffed on the edges. This one is a little bit better. But yeah, Harry Harrison is someone I hear talks about a lot on Booktube, and these were quite cheap. I managed to get these two for about £5. Robert Heinlein. There's so much vintage sci-fi coming out now. Robert Heinlein, Methuselah's Children. This one cost me about £3 or $4 as well. It was in good condition. Heinlein is another sci-fi author. I've picked out 5 or 6 authors that I would try to like gather books by. Starting next year, I'm going to be increasing the amount of sci-fi that I read. They tend to be quite short, the sci-fi novels compared to the fantasy novels. Instead of reading 700-800 pages, you tend to be reading 150 to 300 pages. So yeah, Heinlein as well. Now for some very cheap, I picked this up for £1. I see Bain Books over on my book reviews. They send him books all the time. They tend to be fairly, I wouldn't say, yeah, kind of fairly trashy, kind of sci-fi and crime books most of the time. Some maybe lesser known authors to myself, or maybe just to British audiences, I don't know. But this was To Clear Away the Shadows by David Drake. But this was £1 or $1.25. So when I saw it, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to read the back of this book, and if it tickles my fancy, I'll pick it up. Next up, A Canticle for Libertas. This was just shy of £4 or about $5. It's a very well regarded story, and one that is on kind of the hit list, so to speak. So when I saw this for a reasonable price, I had to pick it up. Oh, we're back to Heinlein again. So this one is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. So when it comes to Heinlein, there was 3 or 4 books that I kind of selected that I would keep my eye out for, and this was one of them. I don't write a list necessarily for this most of the time. I try to remember the names in my head of the books I'm looking for, and luckily enough I had remembered this one, so when I saw it I grabbed it quickly. This one cost me a little over £3 or about $4. Next up is a classic that is on my bucket list. This is an older Macmillan copy. This is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I had shown the sequel's Gone with the Wind before I showed Gone with the Wind, but here I am. I've got it finally. I'm trying to remember how much I paid for this. I think it was £3, so about $3.75. Next up is a sci-fi masterwork. I prefer the older black editions to these newer yellow ones. But this is Frederick Pole Gateway. I have heard this one mentioned before. It seems like a kind of a big box sci-fi, kind of stars and ships and kind of high-tech sci-fi, but one that is obviously good enough to make the sci-fi masterworks. I paid £2 for this, so about $2.50, so not too much. Very, very cheap was this book. I'm sure this needs no introduction. This is The Priory of the Orange Tree. Yeah, Samantha Shannon has got a lot of play on Booktube. This book, there's no point me really building this up. Everyone's probably seen this. It's only cost me £1. That's why I picked it up. It gets a lot of talk. It was just £1 or $1.25. It's in pretty good condition for the price, so I thought I'd grab it. Next is one that was recommended on the Outlaw Bookseller. He did a review recently of The Tartar Step. This is by Dino Buzzati, and this is quite a less well-known classic. It's got like a blurb on here by the Sunday Times, so it must have had quite a write-up in its day. But yeah, the premise was so interesting to me. I implore you to go and look up the premise if you like to do that. If you don't like spoilers, I totally understand. I'm not going to spoil anything here, but look up the premise. Really intriguing concept, and it's certainly right up my street. I know this was rebadged as a different name in the US later date. I think it was Stronghold. So yeah, look out for that. A book that has also got a lot of play on Booktube, but was already on my TBR already. I just didn't have a copy of it yet. Was Augustus by John Williams. I already owned a copy of Stoner, but I didn't own a copy of Augustus. I had been looking for one at a reasonable price, but this does not go cheap. It's hard to find a copy of Augustus for less than kind of like £10. I paid £3.80 for this, or about $5. So I was really happy to get a copy of Augustus at a reasonable price. This, I don't think it's hard to find in the US. It is very, tricky to find a good priced copy in the UK. I don't know why. One guy that's not hard to find anywhere you go is Blake Crouch. I don't have a copy of Recursion. I saw Recursion for cheap. I'm sure anyone can find Recursion for cheap, to be fair. I think I paid about $3.90, $3.80, something like that. So about $5 for Recursion, which is a decent price. I've been enjoying the Pines trilogy by Blake Crouch. I'm sure I'll enjoy that too. And finally, I was looking for some fantasy that doesn't get a lot of play on Booktube, on YouTube generally. And is it the Limond or the Limond Chronicles? Here we go. This is The Game of Kings. And I've heard that this was, a real kind of precursor to modern fantasy. It's one of those kind of similar to maybe Sorrow and Fawn. It probably doesn't get the love that it deserves. Dorothy Dunnett. This comes quite highly regarded, but not much talked about. Yeah, the Limond Chronicles. What a great cover that is as well. Yeah, so check this out if you've never heard of this before. This cost me about £3.30 or about $4, so it's nice and cheap. It does have multiple books in here. It's a really nice collection. And in total, I paid about, let's have a look, I think I've written it down here, £65 for those 20 paperbacks, or about $82. So I paid about £3.50 to $4 per book. So I think that's pretty good value. I got a lot of books off my bucket list this time. I've kind of increased my sci-fi kind of shelf, and got some of the missing fantasy books as well. I'm really happy with that pickup. Let me know if anything has caught your eye from today, and we'll have a chat about it.